So everyone, Jonathan Green is Manager of Carbon and Environment at the ILSC. Jonathan has experience in land management projects, policy and research from diverse regions across Australia, focusing on private and public land conservation and restoration, and enabling Indigenous land management aspirations for cultural, economic and environmental benefits. He has worked for Commonwealth, state and territory governments, ecological consultancies and industry bodies. Most recently, his work with the Indigenous Land and Sea Corporation has focused on enabling Indigenous involvement in carbon farming opportunities through savanna fire abatement, human-induced regeneration, and environmental plantings and methodologies. This has included through supporting Indigenous engagement and leadership in carbon methodology developments and access to carbon project development opportunities. Jonathan is motivated by a vision of people living in balance with the natural world where Indigenous knowledge and cultural approaches respected by and shared with the broader community. And the title of his presentation is Indigenous Carbon Project Development with ILSC. So thank you, Jonathan.
Okay, thank you very much for that intro. Can you see my the start of my PowerPoint there?
Yep.
Yeah, thank you.
Looks good.
All right, so yeah, sorry, like Gillian, I couldn't join you today. I've actually come down with a cold, so excuse me if I sneeze. So it's probably a good idea. I'm not travelling at the moment, but I'm joining you from Kaurna country in Adelaide, South Australia. I'd like to pay my respects to their elders, past and present, and also pay my respects to the Indigenous participants in this session, and especially my fellow Indigenous panel members. And I'd also like to thank Gillian for her presentation there, and the shout out to the Mimosa project. So that's a very exciting project, and we're glad to be collaborating with the LRF on that one. So I'd like to give you a bit of a background about how the ILSC works, how we select and engage with projects, and then sort of weave traditional ecological knowledge into that selection process, and talk about a few projects at the end of this presentation. But I did firstly want to just mention that we don't specifically go out to target traditional ecological knowledge when we're looking at projects to support. We're generally looking for a holistic suite of outcomes, and we're looking to support Indigenous aspirations. So where TEK applies in those settings, that's all well and good and fantastic. Okay. So the ILSC was created back in 1995 following the High Court decisions that followed the Marburg court case. So that led to the Native Title Act, and then following on from the Native Title Act, there was the Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander Act was created. And that was created to recognise that many Indigenous people rather, were unable to assert native title rights because they'd been dispossessed of their lands and therefore couldn't demonstrate continuous connection with their country. So the Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander Act provides for the operations of the ILSC, and the funding to deliver the ILSC's work was credited to over a 10-year period from 94 with direct appropriations, and it became a self-sustaining capital fund known as the Land and Sea Account from 30th of June 2004. So the ILSC's purpose, as defined in the ATSI Act, is to assist Aboriginal persons and Torres Strait Islanders to acquire land and water-related rights, to assist Aboriginal persons and Torres Strait Islanders to manage Indigenous held land and waters, and to do all these things to provide economic, social and cultural benefits for Indigenous people. So there's a little graphic here showing, sorry, let's go back a sec, showing how we join the dots there. So our main mechanism for funding projects is called Our Country, Our Future, or OCOF. And the things we're funding are LM, or land management, and LA, land acquisition. So the outcomes we're seeking to support are Indigenous people maintaining and growing the value and productivity of their country, people owning and managing country sustainably, people influencing policy and opportunity for their country, and Indigenous people strengthening culture through reconnection to country. So to date, the ILSC, or over the last 25 years or so, has purchased many properties around Australia. The map here shows ILSC's land acquisition activities, and it's overlain with a map of native title claim areas. So the blue areas are properties that the ILSC has purchased and now divested to local Aboriginal corporations. And the red spots on the map, if you can see them, are the ongoing land holdings that the ILSC has at the moment and is aiming to divest in the near future. What the map doesn't show is the sweep of land management assistance grants and projects that we've funded over the years, and that would certainly fill in several gaps in that map. So we're quite proud of our impact over the last 25 years or so. So how do we work? Well, we look at the opportunities that are available, and we're considering if projects that will deliver good social, economic, cultural and environmental benefits. Will they deliver genuine Indigenous-led decision-making and control? And are they going to be consistent with our Act? And in the assessment process, we've got the 5 Cs there. We obviously want projects to have a delivery model that is something that they're capable of delivering, they have capacity to deliver, that has the necessary collaborations to allow it to flourish, has the appropriate capital, and is on country that can support it. And then when we're considering our decisions, we're looking at whether the proponent, the Indigenous project proponent, is ready for their investment, what other funding partners and sources need to be considered, and is post-investment support going to be required over long term? So here's another way of looking at that. If you start at the bottom here, you can see the ILSC inputs are the funding, our ILSC staff, our knowledge and our connections that we can bring to the project or fund to bring to a project. And we aim to deliver the activities. So through those funds, make sure that the project is able to get started, and then lead on to those outcomes there where we're seeing growing value in the Indigenous estate. And eventually return on mandate as far as the ILSC is concerned, which means generating ongoing cultural, social, environmental and economic returns for the Indigenous land or sea rights holders. And you can see an example in the column on the right there. So just a basic example. The Indigenous landholder may have an aspiration to produce a crop of some sort. The ILSC helps to buy the tractor. Then the tractor is used to produce the productivity, and you can hopefully end up with a sustainable ongoing activity. This is all backed up by a program logic. So I won't read this whole thing to you, but this is a representation of how the ILSC seeks to affect our outcomes. I guess one of the main things to look at there is that central row with the bold headings. What the ILSC is doing, we're investing in projects, funding the acquiring, granting, managing, or developing land and water interests. We're providing advice and capability support, supporting Indigenous landholders with access to information, training, knowledge and systems to support sustainable land management and benefits. And we're looking at connecting the project or the Indigenous proponents with markets. So obviously the example here is carbon markets and the associated opportunities and partnerships that might be needed or helpful in their meeting their aspirations. So just circling back to the team in the ILSC, I manage our carbon and environment section, so it's a small team. And yeah, we're looking to support Indigenous people deriving benefit from their country through the avenues of the carbon market, environmental services, environmental offsets, and other related opportunities where they can be brought in and used to help Indigenous people to meet their land management or sea access aspirations. One of the big projects we're working on is the what we call the Savannah Fire Management Program, which is a program focused in the northern part of the NT, the top end. And it's a $34 million project funded by the INPEX-operated Ichthys LNG gas project. So under that project, the ILSC is working with Indigenous landholders across the top end to support them to develop Savannah Fire Management carbon projects. So the team has capacity in project development, feasibility, ecological assessments, and environmental offset project assessments. We can provide grant funding for land acquisition projects and startups in this area, and we invest in and support the Indigenous engagement with R&D and the environmental economy. We've done a lot of work, including collaborations with other panelists in this session, to support the development of the Savannah Fire methodologies over the last several years, as one example. So I was just going to dive into a couple of projects here. Most of these photos are from the recent Savannah Fire Management Program annual report. So you can see up in the top left there is a traditional owner, and the comment there is the project is providing opportunities for traditional owners to visit country and to manage important sites. So we see that as a great outcome of these projects. So, you know, the economic driver of access to the carbon market is certainly a fantastic outcome and a mechanism, economic advantage for Indigenous people that wish to engage with that. But in delivering that project, as other panelists have mentioned, there's also fantastic opportunities for Indigenous people to weave in and engage with their land management custodianship and their obligations to country, visiting cultural sites, getting more people out on country and reconnecting, and allowing for that Indigenous intergenerational knowledge transfer. The other photo there with the big baobab tree is a meeting on country down at the Judborough project area, the Old Gregory National Park. And this meeting was to talk about setting up the fire management planning for the year ahead, and also it was also tied in with the consent process to get the project started in the first place. In the bottom two photos there, we've got traditional owners sharing and providing guidance around, you know, based on their Indigenous traditional knowledge on fire behaviour in the landscape. That's going directly into fire management plans. So the Savannah Fire Management Carbon Project can be as effective as possible in terms of earning credits, but also utilising that Indigenous knowledge in its delivery and application. And then it's not my part of the ILSC, but the ILSC also is supporting projects in the bush food, bush medicine space. And this is a photo from one of our projects that's supporting the development of the Kakadu plum industry. And I thought I'd pop it in here because it relates to the Thumbera project, which is mentioned, which is sort of indicated in that top left photo there. So there's some good engagement going on between the fire project rangers and the ladies that are involved in the Kakadu plum harvest, making sure that the fires don't burn out Kakadu plum harvest areas. So, you know, just another example that these projects can help to build that network of land management that is tapping into Indigenous knowledge in Kakadu plum locations, when the right time to harvest is, and how to look after those patches, and all integrating that in with fire management. So you can see the carbon project is sort of got the little feelers and fingers going out to support the reinstatement of that network of Indigenous knowledge in the landscape. I also wanted to touch in on some other projects here. So the projects on the left of screen are from a property called Gracevale that the ILSC purchased a couple of years ago. So this project was a very degraded, scruffy looking patch of old cattle country. We assessed that it was capable of supporting a human-induced regeneration project that's now underway. And it's actually a project that's also receiving some support from the Land Restoration Fund. So that's another good collaboration there between the ILSC and the Land Restoration Fund. But it's all, it's all happening because the aspirations of the Indigenous landowners are to get this country looked after properly. You can see some vegetation clearing in the top left photo there, probably an area that should never have been cleared. Down in the bottom left there, there's a big dam, a spring-fed dam. And that dam's actually located on an old artesian basin spring. And there's a number of springs that have been badly damaged on that property. So the new Indigenous landowners are keen to reinstate all of these things. And that's all being delivered and supported through the collaboration of the ILSC, helping to obviously to buy the property and provide the space for these Indigenous aspirations to be rekindled and brought back to life. And the Land Restoration Fund and the carbon market providing the mechanism to actually get the project going. And then within that project, we're seeing these Indigenous aspirations in restoring cultural sites and looking after country properly being able to be brought into effect. And then another project there on the left of screen. This is a project. This is not a carbon project, but I thought I'd throw it in as just out of interest. So this project is restoring some really nasty looking erosion gullies on a property in the Great Barrier Reef catchment. So these erosion gullies are contributing sediments that end up on the Great Barrier Reef and cause problems like stimulating algal blooms and things like that. And so, yeah, we're doing work on this property, utilising local Indigenous community members, going out to work and, providing jobs and education and engagement in repairing these sites and stabilising the gullies. And also, through this work, it's protecting cultural site areas that are threatened by erosion damage and water holes and things like that in the associated rivers and creeks that are important cultural sites. So, and we hope that this project will be able to access an emerging market based on reef credits. So that will actually fund projects that reduce nutrients and sediment flows into the barrier reef. So it's just another example of an emerging market for ecosystem services. So the ILSC is not sort of one-eyed here saying we just want to work on carbon projects, but we're very keen to see the development of more holistic opportunities for Indigenous people in their land management aspirations for those to be recognised by markets and those markets to support their land management aspirations. So just another slide here. Just a bit of a recapping slide. The Indigenous estate is over 170 million hectares, or around 20% of the Australian land mass. IPAs and working on country projects cover 67 million hectares. There's 130 groups managing country and delivering environmental, social and cultural and economic returns, or I should say 130 plus groups. And 5 carbon projects show how to create a market for these solutions, generating carbon credits or ACCUs, jobs and income. And the ILSC is really interested in how we might create and expand these markets to support Indigenous aspirations and the rekindling of Indigenous ecological knowledge so that, we see our lands restored around Australia back to how they ought to be.
Just giving you a 2-minute warning.
Okay. And yeah, well, that's it. Thank you very much.
Jonathan. So before we break for get the panel all together, was there a question for Jonathan on his presentation? Seems all very quiet from this end. Sorry, Jonathan. Maybe during the panel there'll be more questions. So are we just gonna get everyone to have a yarn now? If people in the room have questions to throw or comments or discussion with any of the speakers that they've listened to today in this session? Did you guys just want to sit where you are? Or, yeah. Cool.
Yes.
They'll turn around.
Yeah. Can you guys hear me? Can you guys hear me on this? Okay, yes. And this question kind of is for Jonathan as well as all of the panelists. Ricky Archer mentioned something that really stuck with me earlier, and I don't know exactly how.